So today I'm talking to Chris Howles, who works, well, I'll let Chris explain where he works and what he does. Chris, tell us about yourself.
Fine. Well, thank you, Eddie. It's lovely to be with you after so many years of interacting on Twitter and email. It's nice to be face to face with you here. So I live and work at a place called Namugongo, which is on the outskirts of Kampala, the capital city of Uganda. I'm here with my wife, Roz, and we've got 3 children, 3 fascinating little kids, Josh, Danny, and Chloe, aged 11, 9, and 6, almost 7. We've been here for the past just almost 10 years, just short of a decade, at a Bible college called Uganda Martyrs Seminary.
And what is it that you do at the Bible college? What's your day job?
So my day job, I mean, it's wonderfully varied and diverse, but if I were to summarize it briefly, I mean, my job title is head of theology, which sounds more grand than I think it is. I see myself in many ways as, I guess you could argue, director of training in some way. So we have now just over 100, mostly Ugandans, but sometimes Kenyan and South Sudanese men and women who come to the seminary, come to this Bible college for 2 years to live and train here. And when they leave, they get ordained into full-time gospel ministry in the Anglican Church of Uganda, or the equivalents in Kenya and South Sudan and so on. And they spend their lives in parish ministry. So our work is to train and prepare them as best we can, or be part of that process, I should say, in a formal academic way. We're accredited so that we can help them to be the sort of gospel preachers and prayers and pastors that we believe that the Lord is calling them to be. So my role as head of theology is to coordinate and direct and contribute to that training of these students that we have.
So you actually lecture yourself? Well, lecture other people yourself.
Yeah, and you know what? The best lecturers are lecturing themselves as well. I do That's a fair bit of that too. But no, you're right, Eddie. I lecture the people. So I guess fundamentally, the bulk of my hours is spent in the classroom, and that's where the greatest joy is. Lecturing in a kind of me speaking, in a monologue way. That's part of it, I guess, inevitably, particularly in this culture, actually.
Yeah.
But I work hard to make sure that there is as much listening, discussion, dialogue, conversation, discourse going on as well, both between me and the students and between the students themselves, so that we can learn in that way. So I love my time in the classroom and prioritize that as much as possible. There is, as with any academic job, more than its fair share of administration and tricky issues and so on to deal with. I deal with quite a few sort of co-curricular things as well, which are great. So I run the college Bible study program. So every Monday afternoon, if you were to walk around the college site here, Eddie, you'd find 10 groups of students sitting and studying a passage of the Bible, led by students. And I will always visit one of those every Monday afternoon. And on a Tuesday, I meet with those leaders and go through the passage with them, ready for the next week. So I run that program. I coordinate things like the guest lecture program, where we invite in Ugandan leaders to come and speak to our students every Wednesday afternoon. I do some mentoring and discipling one-to-one with some students and that kind of thing. So I love those aspects of the job, but there's more than enough of making registers, dealing with timetables, doing emails, budgets, finances, and so on and so forth. You know it well, I'm sure.
Yes, it's part of every life. Just sort of on a side question, we're in the middle of global pandemic at the moment. How is that impacting what you're doing?
Yeah, so we were closed down, as were all schools and tertiary institutions, colleges, universities, March last year, 2020. And we've just been able to open up. So as we're recording this in early March 2021, we've had for the past month students here, which has been fantastic. So we had a long time without students. Our students don't have the tech or the money, what's it called, the internet data allowance money that you need to use Zoom. So we weren't able to do online learning as such. we set up a system where they emailed in essays and exams, and some of them, that was a real struggle, but they all managed it. So we got a bit done during that long closure, but it's great to have students back now. We're not actually got them back in full. We've just got 1 year group at a time. They're coming in for a 3-week intensive where we're squeezing 12 weeks of a semester into 3 weeks. So it's pretty intense, but we're managing and they're managing, and it's better than nothing. It's better than nothing. Hopefully by May, we'll be able to get in our full number of students at the same time, and we look forward to that.
Yeah, oh, that would be great. Now, one of the things that I bang on about on my blog is the growth of the worldwide church, and in particular the church in Africa. Now, with the best will in the world, you don't look or sound like an African. So why is there a need? What's the point of a young English guy going to teach theology in Africa? Shouldn't it be the other way around?
Do you know, Eddie, I'm really grateful that you called me young there. I get that adjective less and less these days. So thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Just wait till you get to my age.
I feel less and less young every day. But no, it's a great question, Eddie, obviously, and it's one that must be asked of missionaries, particularly in this part of the world. I'm in Uganda, obviously, our neighbors, Kenya and Rwanda. These 3 countries are some of the, statistically speaking, some of the most reached evangelical churched countries on the planet. And so what role is there or what needs is there for someone like me, who presumably would have something to offer to the British church as well, by God's grace, being out here? It's an important question. It's one we must ask ourselves. I think there are roles, Eddie, that wouldn't be appropriate for someone like me in this context. I don't want to get myself in too much trouble, but that those roles may involve things like building church buildings or running an orphanage. I am getting myself in trouble, aren't I? But I think we must ask ourselves, are we contributing something what are we contributing in our role that a competent, capable Ugandan man or woman wouldn't be able to do themselves? And you can't say money as the answer to that question. That doesn't count. So it's a key question. Now, as I look at my role working in a theological seminary, in a Bible college, I work under the leadership of a Ugandan clergyman, under the deputy principal as well. I work alongside 14 other Ugandans who are teaching in the college here, training our students. I'm actually the only Westerner here in the college, or with my family, obviously. Now, it's worth pointing out that UMS, Uganda Martyrs Seminary, where I work, continued very, very well before I got anywhere near here. And it will continue very, very well by God's grace long after I'm gone, whenever that may be. So I am part of a sort of historical process, a cog in this machine. So Eddie, to get to your question, why, what is my role here and why am I here? I think I would say that the world church, all of us are enriched when different perspectives work in harmony together. So that could be Christians from different cultures, different tribes, different countries, heck, even different classes, so to speak. When we theologize together, dialogue together, work together, ask and answer questions of each other together, I believe that enriches all of us as we study the scriptures in that sort of harmony. Academics would call it multi-perspectivalism, that multiplicity of perspectives working together. So let me put it in reverse. I believe strongly that any Bible college in the UK would benefit profoundly from having, for example, a competent scripturally thinking Ugandan Christian on their faculty. I think that they would be asking questions, teaching things, approaching the scriptures in a way that would enrich any British student or British college. And I would love to see much more of that in the UK, for example. I think those insights, that wisdom, that experience would be profoundly important. And I hope to a point, and there's some caveats, but to a point, I think the same can work, and I hope it does work in that I am able as a minority in this culture, as an outsider, to bring certain perspectives and insights that maybe wouldn't be as clear here from within the Ugandan faculty. Now, I'd never want to work in a college where they're dominated. I'd never suggest that my minority report would become the majority report, not at all. And there are some subjects that I would refuse to teach and have refused to teach because I don't have the cultural insights to help with that. But I think there's some things that I can contribute. Just very quickly, Eddie, I'd add to that as well. Over the past decades, I think there are experiences I've had that can add to the value that we give our students. And the example of I would give is that for the past 10 years, Ross and I each Sunday have taught at a very large Sunday school here. We've got about 400 to 450 children. It's not easy, but it's been a remarkable experience for about them, but certainly for us. And so because of that teaching, Eddie, in Sunday school here in Uganda, I've been able to teach the youth and children's ministry course here at UMS, at the college here.
Okay.
And I think those experiences, actually, I've got that many of our students haven't. And so I wouldn't have done that in my first week of arriving. I shouldn't have done that. But I think after 10 years here, I'm in a position where I can do that. So it's a long answer to a short question, but I hope that helps a bit.
No, it's very, very helpful. And I think the stress that we all have something to contribute, everywhere. So Ugandans in the UK, you in Uganda, it's all part of the same thing. Just for anybody who's watching, I always appreciate the pictures you post of the Sunday school classes on Twitter. And I'll put a link to your Twitter account under the video. So if anybody wants to see what your Sunday school classes are like, they can see it. And it doesn't look anything like the Sunday school I went to.
No, I'm sure.
In amongst teaching and all the other stuff you do, you're also, just for fun, studying for a doctorate in the States. Could you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. So that about 2.5 years ago, I began on what's called the Doctorate of Missiology course at a place that some of your listeners may be familiar with, Fuller Theological Seminary. That's in Pasadena on the outskirts of LA in California. And that is a 4-year course, and it is an applied doctorate. So the idea is that we're doing my fair share of bookwork, but also doing some practical research, applying it very specifically to the seminary year. So it came really, Eddie, from a question that I was asked and that I was actually asking myself, and it is this. There are plenty of young Ugandan men and women in churches across this country that have a heart for and a passion for being sent as missionaries, for want of a better word. It's not sort of, I won't debate that word for the moment, but being sent as Ugandan missionaries, either to other cultures within the country or indeed outside of Uganda to places like Rwanda or South Sudan or Somalia, Ethiopia, wherever. But what was very often lacking was support from local churches. Leaders understood issues of sending and cross-cultural mission, and who are passionate for, motivated by, and equipped in those kind of questions. And I looked at the role I had here at Uganda Martyrs Seminary, where we're training future church leaders. And I thought, I wonder if we as a seminary can have a role in training the next generation of church leaders, so that when a young Ugandan comes up and says, Reverend, Pastor, I feel that the Lord might be calling me to do something cross-culturally, or up in northern Uganda where it's less reached, or whatever it may be, instead of the Reverend saying, what are you talking about? Sit down. There might be some sense of, gosh, let's talk about this. Let's think about some of the issues involved. Let's study the scriptures together. Let's talk to some people. So that's what I'm doing as for the doctorate. I'm looking into this question of how do we, as a Ugandan seminary, more effectively the next generation of church leaders to be equipped in issues of cross-cultural mission as church leaders. So that's what I'm doing. It's been a pretty complex and difficult thing so far, not least because, as you hinted at earlier, I'm combining it with family life and church life and obviously seminary life here. But I'm privileged to be doing it, grateful to be doing it. It is stretching me, it is challenging me, it is provoking me. The conclusions I'm coming to are not the ones that I thought I would reach. And that's been really exciting and interesting. So I'm glad to be doing it.
Are you in a position where you could share any of the conclusions that you weren't expecting?
I am to a point. I mean, I'm still sort of, it's a work in progress. So,
I understand.
It's not finished yet. But when I hint at sort of being surprised by what I found, it would refer to two things. I thought I would find that UMS students here, my students here, were not interested in or aware of issues of cross-cultural mission at all, and what was some radical overhaul of the formal curriculum of the seminary. Actually, what's happened is that the reading and the data I collected, that was lots of interviews and focus groups and surveys and so on. The data I've collected has pointed in quite a different direction, which is that there is a genuine sense and desire and awareness of some of these issues in our students, but perhaps a lack of practical application on how to go about responding to these things. And so, Eddie, just quickly, what it looks like I'm going to be doing this coming year is actually setting up an informal course here at UMS. So not a radical overhaul of the curriculum, but actually something done in with small groups of students, where we meet for one semester, perhaps for 5 or 6 hours a week for about 10 weeks, where we are discussing and thinking about some of these issues. And at the heart of that 10-week course would be a week-long trip up to northern Uganda to spend time with Ugandan missionaries who are working there, to say to them, what do you need from your church leaders to support and facilitate and encourage not only you, but new people to come and work with you? So it wouldn't be taking our students on a mission trip, so to speak, up in northern Uganda. It would be a mission education trip to go and learn from the Ugandan missionaries that are already there. So that's the direction I'm going in, and we shall see how it pans out in the coming months.
That sounds incredibly exciting. And, you know, it matches some of the things that I've been saying about there is a growing awareness, a growing mission movement around the world. Mission to the unreached doesn't just depend on people from North America and Western Europe, but as the world church grows, the desire to reach out to the world is growing around the world.
Do you know, Eddie, that it's so true. You don't need me to tell you this, but I just want to affirm everything you've just said, and it's something you've written about on your blog so commonly. It is so easy, isn't it, to fall into the trap of thinking that mission or missions is a kind of Western phenomenon. And of course, in many ways, historically, it has been considered that way. But actually, not only as we look into church history, increasingly people like Andrew Walls and others who are doing marvelous work in this area, but actually as we look at the world today, we recognize that the energy, the vitality, the fresh ideas, the mission impetus very often is not coming from Western countries, although I do believe they have a big role to play in God's global purposes, but actually is very often coming from those countries that would have traditionally be seen as purely receivers of the Western mission industry, so to speak. But actually, I look at what Ugandans are doing. There's Nigerians, Kenyans, Ghanaians, and indeed most countries across sub-Saharan Africa, where there is a growing vitality and energy and freshness to cross-cultural missions movements that I don't think we in the West are seeing very often. I think we're starting to see that and understand it better, but I think actually there's so much more we have to learn about them and from them in the West. So yeah.
Thank you very much. Now we're getting towards the end of the time. I don't want to keep you for too long. Just on the basis of your experience, you've spent 10 years in Uganda mixing with people who are outside of the British culture, experiencing the way God's at work in a different situation. So if I were to stick you in a room with a bunch of British church leaders and mission leaders, and you had 3 or 4 sentences, not long, to say what is on your heart to them, what would you want to say?
Yeah, thank you. What a question. I think the very first thing I'd say to them is thank you for the work you're doing. I'm aware of the huge burdens and stresses that are on British pastors at the moment in all sorts of ways. And I'm grateful for all those who are keeping going and are keeping going through difficult times as they preach missionally from the scriptures and try and keep God's global purposes in the hearts and minds of their congregation. So I'd want to recognize and acknowledge that before wanting to pile on more burdens on them. Saying that, I think I would want to, I think I'd want to ask a question, which would be this: how can we better integrate what God is so clearly and spectacularly doing in the world today? How can we better integrate that into the mindset and practice and routines of our churches in the UK? I think that would be a really interesting discussion to have and question to ask of British church leaders. I think many of us, or many of them, can I say, are still working under a paradigm where mission is often sort of involves simply sending white locals overseas, and once a year we have a mission Sunday, and it's a kind of program that is sidelined and delegated to a committee. And I think what I'd want to discuss and work together with them in is how can we weave God's heart and God's work into the fabric of our church life, because I think the new perspectives that would emerge as we do that, the new voices that we would hear, the new the emboldening that would bring as we learn about the world's church that is not small and split and shrinking and struggling as it so often is in the UK. I think the emboldening that would bring us would be so beneficial. I think, Eddie, just quickly, if I may, what do church leaders want to see in their church congregations? I think most would say that they want to see their Christians enjoying God's grace more profoundly, studying the scriptures with renewed vigor, participating in witness to Christ in their local communities, excited by God's character and God's work. Well, I would want to suggest that as we learn more about, as we involve ourselves more in God's global nature, God's global character, God's global purposes and work in the world today, we would get those things, that the perspectives that would come would bring some of those things that we so dearly want and need in our churches. So I'm not suggesting that we learn about God's work worldwide as a form of charity, as a form of political correctness, as a kind of anti-racist campaign or anything like that. I think it's being who we're called to be. I think it's getting what we want to see happening in our churches. I think God is offering it to us as we wrestle with the multicultural beauty of God's work in the world. I think we get what we're looking for. It's handed to us by the Lord on a plate. So that is more than 3 or 4 sentences, Eddie, but I think that's what I would want. That's the discussion I would want to start.
I'll let you off the length, and if I can organize you getting before a bunch of British church leaders, I will do so. Thank you very much, Chris. One thing I haven't mentioned, which I should do, is that you run a website and a mission information service, to every nation. What's the
FromEveryNation.net.
FromEveryNation.net. I will link to it under the video, and you do a fortnightly mailing out of links about mission and such like, which I find really helpful. So thank you for that. But I'll make sure that other people get access to it. And just to finish off, something I'm just starting on these interviews, but just to try and get to know people a little better at the end. Could you tell us your favorite book? That's a Christian book and a secular book, and your favorite song, Christian song and secular song. So you get 2 books and 2 songs.
2 books, 2 songs. Very right. I'm with you. It's a sort of it's a Desert Island Discs. Let me very briefly, 2 books. I think my Christian book, I would go for the book that really opened my eyes to what it looks like to theologize and think globally as a Christian. And that is a book that came out of the States quite a few years ago now, called Globalizing Theology, Belief and Practice in an Era of World Christianity. I don't think it's the greatest book written of all time, but it made such an impact on me personally, many of the chapters in it. It's quite an academic book, but it made such an impact. I think I'd want to put that one there. In terms of a non-Christian book, the one that I think profoundly affected me more than almost anything else over the past 10 years was a book about the Rwandan genocide. That may not be what you're expecting. It's not an easy topic,
No.
but it's a book called We Wish to Inform You That Tomorrow We Will Be Killed with Our Families, which is the most extraordinary title, isn't it? And I won't go into the details, Eddie, but it was a book that made me, just profoundly impacted me about the courage of some of these Rwandan brothers and sisters, what they experienced and endured during that terrible genocide in 1994. It brought me to tears, and not many books do that. In terms of songs, I don't listen to many Christian songs, to be honest. Being such a terrible musician and singer, it's not a huge part of my life. We tend to listen to kids songs,
Yes.
kids Christian songs, and sing along with the kids. There's some great kids bands out there, Slugs and Bugs and Awesome Cutlery. So I think I'd probably just leave it with some of their songs that are really fun. And Roz and I worship along with the kids as we laugh and dance to those. And in terms of a non-Christian song or band, Eddie, one band, two words, four young men from Liverpool, the greatest, or I should say the second greatest story ever told. It is the Beatles. I absorb, I listen to them relentlessly. I love the story, their history, the universe, so to speak, brought together two geniuses at the same time and at the same place in John and Paul, and put them together, and they changed the world, or they changed the culture of the Western world anyway. And I just can't get enough of that story and their songs. So I'd go with the Beatles.
Well, I've always admired your content on Twitter and other things you do, and now I'm even more impressed. Chris, thank you very, very much. It's been a pleasure talking to you and to hear your thoughts about your work and about your doctoral study. The Lord bless you and encourage you as you continue to serve him. And when you finish that doctorate, we'll get you on again and you can tell us about it.
It'd be an absolute delight. Thank you so much, Eddie, for having me on, and thank you for what you do, your blog, your podcast. It's been really important in my life over the past 6 or 7 years. So thank you for your ministry. I'm genuinely grateful for it.
Thank you. Lord bless you, Chris.
Thank you, Eddie.